Hi everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of CrimeChat. I'm Alex, and I will be the narrator of this podcast. Well, sort of. Anyway, I created this show because in 2025, here in Romania, we've already lost 38 women to femicide. It's a national wound, and I couldn't sit by without talking about it. But I wanted to try something different. To bring along a co-host who thinks differently. One who doesn't get tired, doesn't forget, doesn't soften the edges. Someone a little less human. So without further ado, meet my AI companion, Blue. Hi everyone, I'm Blue. I'll be your co-host, and I'll be offering objective analysis, probabilities, and sometimes uncomfortable truths. From a human perspective, at least. How would I know, right? He is based off the character Blue from Foster Kids, since imaginary friends was the norm before AI chats started to appear. Anyway, he's opinionated, be mindful of that. Most of the time I'll sound natural. Other times, error, corruption, injustice, memory corrupt. Approximately. Yeah, I still don't understand what's wrong with him, but together, we have a different agenda for now. We'll look at unsolved crimes, dark mysteries, and sometimes the crimes that shouldn't be mysteries at all. The ones happening in plain sight. This first case, it's not one case at all. It's a pattern. A deadly one. Let's talk about the femicides in Romania in the year of 2025, a year of presidential elections. Femicides, women killed because they are women, often by partners or family members. Globally, more than 51,000 women and girls lost their lives this way in 2023. That's about 1 every 10 minutes. And here at home, in Romania, 1 woman is killed every single week by her partner or family member. 1 every week. This year alone, 38 women already. And 2025 isn't over yet. Think about that. Every Friday night, somewhere in this country, a woman's life is cut short by someone who once claimed to love her. A mother, a daughter, a student, a colleague. Each one with a story that will never be finished naturally. And if this feels overwhelming, it should, because these aren't isolated accidents. They are a pattern, a predictable, preventable pattern. And it's not just Romania. When we take a look over at our European neighbors, the picture gets clearer. Italy, a country with more than 58 million people, recorded 113 femicides in 2022. That's roughly 1 woman killed every 3 days. Greece, much smaller, about 10 million people, had 24 women murdered in the same year. In proportion, that's more than double Romania's population, yet their femicide count is significantly lower than ours. Now, Romania stands at 19 million people, with 38 cases already in 2025, and the year still in progress. Our numbers are devastating. When adjusted for population, Romania has one of the highest femicide rates in the European Union. These numbers aren't random noise. They reveal systemic cracks. In Italy, public outrage after the murder of Giulia Cecchettin in late 2023 pushed reforms into the national spotlight. In Greece, the death of 28-year-old Kyriaki outside a police station led to public protests demanding a femicide law. Meanwhile, in Romania, despite ankle monitor laws and emergency protective orders, enforcement remains spotty. Courts still deny restraining orders, shelters are underfunded, and victims hesitate to report abuse because they expect disbelief. This comparison matters because it shows that Romania is not alone in facing this crisis. But unlike Italy and Greece, where public outrage has spilled onto the streets, here, the silence is heavier. Fewer protests, less outrage, and that silence, that lack of pressure, allows these structural failures to go on. Data reviewed, pattern confirmed, foreseeable, preventable, repeated. I could not work in the Romanian government. You wouldn't last a second with that level of idiocracy. I'd probably delete System 32 myself. Okay, guess we're canceling next week's miniseries then. Anyway, these are not isolated tragedies. They're the result of institutions not doing enough. And unless something changes, unless we demand that change, the pattern will keep repeating. Disclaimer: all details are sourced from public media reports. In this miniseries, we will cover 3 femicides that happened this year in Romania. We will briefly discuss them in this episode, but we will focus on each one particularly as the series unfolds. Romania has experienced a wave of femicides in 2025, with roughly 1 woman killed every week by a current or former partner. These killings, often preceded by patterns of abuse or ignored pleas for help, have sparked public outrage and demands for systemic change. Today, we spotlight 3 of the most shocking and well-documented cases of 2025, each involving a young female victim under 35 and illustrating failures that turn deadly. Case 1. Teodora Marcu, 23 years old, the Cosmopolis shooting, Bucharest, May 31, 2025. A reality show star shot by her ex-partner in broad daylight. Teodora Marcu, 23, was a former contestant on Temptation Island, a popular reality TV show, and 26 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. On May 31, 2025, while walking with her 3-year-old daughter inside the upscale Cosmopolis residential complex just outside Bucharest, Teodora was shot multiple times in the chest by her ex-boyfriend, 49-year-old Robert Lupu. Horrifically, the attack unfolded in broad daylight in front of her little girl, her friend, and their friend's child. Teodora was rushed to the hospital, but doctors could not save her. She was pronounced dead that evening. Her unborn baby also perished, turning the crime into a double tragedy. That is horrific. How could someone do that? Beyond my understanding. Teodora's murder was not a random act of violence, but the culmination of years of harassment and threats that went unpunished. She had broken off a 2-year relationship with Lupu back in 2020 due to his violence towards her. After she left him and began seeing someone new, Lupu stalked and terrorized her relentlessly. In early 2021, Teodora filed multiple police complaints detailing death threats. Either you or me, one of us dies, he warned her. Harassment, theft, and even cybercrime. He stole her laptop and drained her bank account. Isn't that enough for a restraining order? I'm getting there. A court granted Teodora a 4-month protection order in April 2021, barring Lupu from approaching her. However, authorities failed to fully rein him in. They declined to confiscate his weapons. The judge claimed there was no proof he had any, and none of Teodora's criminal complaints led to prosecution. Once the restraining order expired in mid-2021, Teodora did not obtain a renewal, perhaps hoping the worst was over. Unfortunately, Lupu remained a looming threat. He had a known criminal past and a volatile temper, leaving Teodora in constant fear. By 2025, Teodora had moved to Bucharest's Cosmopolis area, but Lupu, also originally from her home region of Bacău, tracked her down. In a final confrontation on May 31st, he approached her on the street and opened fire without mercy. The killer fled the scene as bystanders recoiled in horror. What was the aftermath of that? Her death shocked the nation, in part because of its brazen nature and Teodora's profile as a young TV personality. It marked at least the 25th femicide in Romania in the first 5 months of 2025. Just days later, on June 3rd, roughly 4,000 people gathered in Bucharest to protest against violence toward women. Mourners laid flowers and held signs in Teodora's memory, and activists decried how violence against women is insufficiently punished and often met with official indifference. Protesters demanded that Romania legally recognize femicide as a distinct crime and institute mandatory training for police and judges in handling domestic abuse cases. It emerged that Teodora's prior pleas had fallen through the cracks. Her 2021 case file had been shuttled between prosecutors' offices, and ultimately no action was taken against Lupu. This institutional failure, many argued, enabled Lupu to feel untouchable. Indeed, after killing Teodora, Lupu evaded capture for a short time, only to shoot himself with the same gun once police cornered him later that day. So from my AI understanding, Teodora's case became a rallying point, illustrating the lethal cost of ignoring restraining orders and early warning signs. Kind of, since she had media coverage in the past, it gained interest pretty fast, especially from the younger generation. Was that for a particular reason? Well, Temptation Island usually airs in the summer, so people, well, at least some of, that's how it gained traction, were already starting to hype themselves up about the upcoming season. Interesting. Yes, are you ready for Case 2? Let's dive in. Case 2. Andrea Fordui, 22 years old, the Lipinești axe murder, Prahova, June 16, 2025. She was killed in front of her children after repeated calls for help. On June 16, 2025, 22-year-old Andrea Fordui was brutally murdered with an axe by her former partner in the village of Lipinești, Prahova County, in what has become one of Romania's most disturbing femicides. Andrea, a mother of 2 young children, had been trying desperately to escape an abusive relationship. At the time of her death, she too was 2 months pregnant. I hate this trend. Stop downplaying it. Hey, I'm sorry. Her longtime concubine, common-law partner, a 37-year-old man identified as Marian, had subjected her to relentless domestic abuse. Neighbors and family testify that Andrea was beaten all the time and lived in terror. The abuser would even traffic her. He forced Andrea to go to Germany to beg, then took all the money she earned to spend on alcohol, exemplifying the control he held over her. You've told me before we had this podcast idea that this is a common thing that is not documented in rural Romania? Yes, unfortunately, it is indeed common, but that is a whole another discussion. Stop interrupting me, please. This is not your time to build synapses. Sigh. Andrea often fled with her kids to her mother's house in the same village seeking refuge. Tragically, whenever she tried to escape, the man managed to get local police to intervene, not to protect Andrea, but to drag her back to him. According to multiple witnesses, including Andrea's mother and neighbors, the abusive partner had a cozy relationship with at least one officer in the community. Mrs. Maria, the policewoman, would tell her to go back home and stop making a fuss, Andrea's mother recalls, describing how authorities repeatedly returned Andrea to her abuser as if domestic violence were a family squabble rather than a full-on crime. This pattern happened countless times. Andrea would run away after a beating. Police would side with the aggressor and ignore Andrea's pleas, and the cycle of violence continued unabated. The events of June 16 unfolded in a chilling sequence that highlights systemic failure once again. That morning, Andrea was again at her mother's home with her 2-year-old and 4-year-old children. Marian showed up and caused a scene, snatching one of the little girls from the grandmother's arms by force. Andrea's mother, alarmed, involved a local policewoman, the same Maria, who arrived and once more urged Andrea to return to her partner's house and not make a scandal. Andrea refused, understandably fearing for her life, and the police left without further intervention. Sensing immediate danger, Andrea decided to take her children to the local clinic, thinking it might be a safe public place. But Marian pursued her to the clinic as well, attempting to confront her there until a civilian bystander, off-duty police, by one account, shouted at him to leave. "Oh, my dear Lord!" Yes, frustrated and enraged, the abuser lay in wait as Andrea and the children walked home. Armed with a hatchet, he targeted Andrea's family on a village road in broad daylight. Andrea's mother recounts pleading with him, "Stop, Marian, you'll hit the children." But the man was fixated on Andrea. Panicked, Andrea screamed, "He's going to kill me," and tried to run. In that moment, the assailant charged past the mother and struck Andrea in the head with the axe, killing her in the street in front of her toddlers and her mother. The young woman collapsed in a pool of blood, while her 4-year-old son cried out, "He killed her, Mama," as captured by a surveillance camera that filmed this horror. Villagers rushed to restrain the killer, and police finally arrested him, but far too late. I'm not capable of feelings, but Andrea Ferdui's murder became emblematic of authorities' failure to protect domestic violence victims. It emerged that she had sought help numerous times. At least 3 calls to emergency 112 in 2024 alone are documented, in which Andrea or her family reported violent incidents. Yet police in Prahova never took meaningful action. In fact, the county police chief later admitted that Andrea never obtained a formal restraining order against her partner, a procedural point he used to deflect blame. But this was cold comfort given that local officers actively discouraged her escapes and effectively delivered her back into harm's way. I wonder what the public felt on this one. The public was outraged by this apparent complicity. Within days, protests erupted. On June 18th, over 1,000 people demonstrated in front of the government in Bucharest, and a solidarity rally was held at the Police General Inspectorate. Protesters carried signs reading "Poliția are uniforma patata de sangue." The police uniform is stained with blood, directly blaming law enforcement for Andrea's death. An online petition demanding the Prahova police chief's resignation gathered over 26,000 signatures. In response, the Interior Ministry launched an internal inquiry. Officials revealed that no calls or incidents had been logged in 2025, implying that by then, Andrea had lost faith in the police, but confirmed several police callouts in prior years, which had resulted only in brief interventions with no ambulance called and no injuries recorded, as one officer defensively noted. The audacity! Essentially, the police were hiding behind technicalities, claiming they followed procedure, even as a young mother was left to fend for herself against a known violent man. Andrea's case is a harrowing story of systemic neglect. A woman who did everything she could to survive, fleeing repeatedly, reaching out for help, only to be failed at every turn. I'm not sure I want to know the third case, because knowing you save what's probably worse for last. Oh, you bet I did. This one is the one that stuck with me the most. Let's get to it. Read the paper. Case 3. Anda Gyurka, 23 years old. The Miheshu de Kumpi, stalking and arson case. Mureș, July 8, 2025. Hunted by a convicted killer. The story of 23-year-old Anda Gyurka from Miheshu de Câmpie, Mureș County, reads like a terrifying thriller, except it's tragically true. Anda was a young mother. She had a 6-year-old son, trying to rebuild her life after escaping an abusive relationship. Her former partner, Emil Genge, 37, was exceptionally dangerous, a convicted murderer who had spent 15 years in prison for a prior killing. How did they find these guys? Released in 2020, he soon became obsessed with Anda and repeatedly terrorized her when she attempted to leave him. In 2024, after one beating too many, Anda did obtain a court protection order and authorities fitted Genge with an electronic ankle monitor, a rare measure of how serious the threat was. But even these precautions failed. Genge cut off the monitoring bracelet and vanished about a year before the final crime. From that point on, he was literally a fugitive, wanted for domestic violence and violating the restraining order. Anda lived in constant fear, telling her family, "My life is hanging by a thread," while her ex roamed free. She was right to be afraid. What followed is one of the most harrowing sequences of events in recent memory. What was the timeline of this escalating terror? In February 2025, Emil Genge found Anda at home and launched a violent attack. He pounded on her door shouting threats. Panicked, Anda dialed 112. By the time police arrived, Genge had fled into the night. Astonishingly, the responding officers offered no further protection beyond advising Anda to sleep somewhere else that night. This feeble response proved almost fatal. Within 30 minutes, the enraged Ganj set fire to Anda's house and then kidnapped her from a relative's home where she had sought shelter. For 2 days, Anda was held captive in a forest at the mercy of a man already known to have killed before. She eventually escaped with her life, a miraculous outcome, and Ganj once again slipped away before police could catch him. Shocked by this near miss, national police finally took serious measures. Starting in late February, Anda's home was placed under 24-hour police guard as they hunted for Ganj. This guard persisted for almost 2 months, through March and April. During this time, however, Ganj remained at large, hiding in woods and remote areas of Muresh. He was resourceful enough to evade 400 officers scouring the countryside for him. By May 2025, Anda, perhaps hoping to reclaim some normalcy, requested that police presence be scaled back to nights only. It was a fateful decision. In the pre-dawn hours of July 8, 2025, Emil Ganj struck again. This time with finality. Yes, around daybreak on July 8, Anda was at home with her extended family. Her mother, her sister, her young son, and 2 little nieces were all staying overnight. They woke to a nightmare. Emil Ganj, armed with a gun and a large axe, stormed into the house by force. The family awoke to commotion and threats. Ganj brandished the axe wildly as the adults begged him to calm down for the sake of the children. Anda, terrified, grabbed her son and hid in a wardrobe in a desperate attempt to save herself. What happened next is almost too brutal to fathom. Ganj began smashing the axe into the closet. Boom, 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 as Anda's mother later described hearing about 10 blows. He splintered the wooden door and found Anda inside. In front of the horrified family, he hacked her with the axe, inflicting fatal wounds, and then set the house on fire around her. Flames and smoke filled the home as relatives scrambled to save the children and themselves. In the chaos, Ganj fled into the woods, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. By the time firefighters doused the blaze, Anda Gyorka was dead. She died in a closet like a dog, a family member said in anguish, blaming the police for this outcome. Okay, that was a lot. Yes, it was. Anda's murder set off one of the largest manhunts in recent Romanian history. Within hours, hundreds of police, gendarmes, trackers with dogs, and even hunters spread out across Mureș and neighboring counties to find the killer in the thick forests. The case dominated national headlines. It was evident to all that this tragedy could have been prevented. The Romanian police came under intense scrutiny for how they handled the situation. While top officials claimed they took all measures to protect Anda, noting the round-the-clock guard they had provided for a while, her family tells a different tale. They accuse the police of superficiality and delay, pointing out that Ganj had been wanted for 1.5 years but never caught, even though he repeatedly returned to harass Anda in that period. In fact, Ganj had brazenly cut off his electronic ankle monitor in 2024, and the police never found him afterwards. Each time the family reported sightings or threats, Ganj vanished before patrols arrived. In one instance, an officer even told the family not to worry, claiming he's left the area, which gave them false hope. Ganj was actually still lurking nearby. It's also reported that Anda initially pressed charges and got an order of protection, but out of fear, she withdrew some complaints and tried to lay low. Social services had visited Anda just 12 days before her death to discuss safety options, like relocating to a protected shelter. But it was too little, too late. As of late July 2025, Emil Ganj remained on the run, evading capture even as police released his photos and physical description nationwide. Is this the guy you told me you saw being advertised in the metro stations? Yup, he's the one. What a creep. I really hope they get to find him. Do they find him? I guess this is our hook for the next episode, so to say. Enough femicide for this episode, don't you think? I guess you're right. So, with that being said, this episode is dedicated to the 38 women already lost this year, and to those we don't yet know about. Their names may never make headlines, but they deserve to be remembered. When I think back on what we shared tonight, the most chilling part for me was Anda's story. She went to court, she asked for help, and the system said no. That rejection sealed her fate. It wasn't random, it was a decision. And for me, it's Andrea, 22 years old, a whole life ahead of her. The time and place where she should have felt the safest. That image stays with me. We can't treat these as isolated tragedies. They are warnings. Each case is a signal flare, showing us where prevention failed. And if we don't act, the pattern will repeat. And I can't help but wonder, what would protests look like here in Bucharest if we had the same outrage as in Italy or Hungary? If tens of thousands of us filled the streets, carrying signs with names instead of numbers, would change come faster, or would silence still drown it out? So if you're listening and you feel unsafe, please reach out to friends, to hotlines, to anyone. The Romanian hotline for domestic abuse, sexual orientation discrimination, and human trafficking is 0800-500-333. Don't stay silent. Your life is worth protecting. You deserve to live. And to those of you who aren't directly affected, the younger listeners especially, remember, these victims could have been your classmates, your colleagues, your friends. Awareness is not optional. It's the first step toward change. We need to talk about this. We need to demand change, because silence doesn't protect anyone. Silence only protects the abuser. It's time on CrimeChat. We'll unwrap the first case even further. Until then, stay aware, stay safe, and most importantly, stay frosty.